Good morning. My name is Marisa. Welcome back to the channel. And today, I want to share with you guys this really encouraging dream that I had from the Lord last night, and then the interpretation of the dream and a word. So in the dream, it was so encouraging. Okay, so the dream was I was in this house that I recognized from my childhood. Like, it was someone I know's house. I don't think that was important, but it was just a very familiar house to me. But it was decorated a little bit different. Like a lot of things were different. So I was walking around looking at all the things in the house. No one was home. It was just me. And I was like kind of like meandering through this house, and I was like, oh, that's different. This is different. And then I was like, I'm kind of hungry. So I went to like the cabinet and I pulled down this jar. It was like this tall jar, and it had all this, it was clear, see-through, but I didn't really look into the jar before I decided to like see what was in it and to eat out of it. But I opened the lid and I pulled out like a sunflower seed, and I went to eat it, and I was like, I think this is pet food. I don't think this is like, I don't think this is people food. And I was like grossed out that I ate this thing out of here, and I was like, what's in this jar? And so I looked through the jar, and it was like almost like, when you have like when you're a kid and you make like a little terrarium for like lizards or something like that. It was like that. And so, but it wasn't a lizard inside. It was this, it looked like a tiny dog or a tiny little furry animal. And it was the size of a tiny puppy. And so I thought it was a puppy. And so I was like, what? But it wasn't, it looked like it was sleeping. It didn't look dead, but I was like, well, it's dead. Why is this dead puppy in a jar like this? I mean, it has to be dead if it's in this terrarium jar, and it shouldn't be here, And so I was like, that's so weird, and my curiosity kicked in, and so I took off the lid and well, no, and then I saw it move a little bit, and I was like, maybe it's alive, but my first instinct was that it was completely dead. And so when I saw it kind of open its eye, it scared me. It was like, when you see like movies and people are dead, and then they come back to life. That's what this was like. So I knew, like, at first look, it was dead, and it was in a jar in a cupboard, like it was not alive. But then when I started looking at it and like seeing what it was, it looked at me and it scared the bejesus out of me. I was like, oh my gosh, it's alive. So then I got freaked out, and I took the lid off, and I set it down on the ground, because I was like, what's gonna come out of this thing? Like, what? This puppies don't belong in jars, like, you know what I mean? So it didn't make sense to me. So I set it down on the ground, and it started to climb out of this long tube terrarium thing, and and then I realized it's not a puppy, it's a cow. It's a baby cow. And I was like, it had little hooves, and it was like crawling out, and it was scaring the crap out of me. But like, when I was looking at it in the jar, it was very bizarre, because it had fur, it was clean and all that. But after it climbed out of the jar, all of a sudden it was like encased in a womb. It was encased in like, when women have like, C-sections, and they pull the baby out and it's still in its sack. It was still in that, like, whatever that sack thing is called. So it was like, it had that film around it. When dogs give birth and they have to lick all that stuff off the puppies, that's what it was covered in. And so it climbed out, and it was all gooey, and I was like, oh no, how am I gonna clean this? This is disgusting. And so I was like, oh, a dog could clean this. And so I yelled for the dog, and it was like my childhood dog that came in, and it was like licking the cow clean. And the more it would lick it clean, the bigger the cow would get, and until it was like this massive cow. It was like, so it was not even a little tiny thing anymore. It was like a big calf. And that was the end of the dream. And so, it was the symbolism in this dream, y'all, is so encouraging. So basically, anytime you dream of a house, generally speaking, it's you. It's like you're life or whatever, because it wasn't my house, it was like a house I was familiar with, but it wasn't my house. I felt like this dream was more than just me. And basically, the cow, I thought it was a dog just because I couldn't really see what it was, and it was just furry, and because of the size of it, I thought, oh, that's just a puppy because it was so little, but it wasn't a puppy, it was a cow, and cows represent provision, they represent blessing, they represent promises. Think of Joseph's dream of the cows, 7 lean cows, 7 fat cows, or the Pharaoh's dream that he interpreted, things like that. And I've dreamed of cows many times, especially lately, but over the past 10 years of my life, cows always represent provision, blessing, and promises. And so this thing looked dormant. It was dead on a shelf. It looked like it was completely dead. It was in an environment that it didn't really make sense to be in. And but the thing was, to me, upon first inspection, it was completely dead. It was dead in a jar. And so that promise in your life may look dead, right? It looks like it's in a place where it doesn't even belong. It's in an environment that it doesn't even make sense that it should be in. And, so then when pulling it out and letting it was like when it was coming out of this long tube, it was almost like it was giving birth, right? And it was covered in the birth goo, and it was disgusting, and I was just like, oh my God, like, how am I going to clean this thing off? And so I just my natural thing was to have the dog come and lick it off. And so it did. And instantly this thing grew like full size calf. A calf is pretty large, like a couple hundred, even a baby cow is a couple hundred pounds. So this thing grew instantaneous. And so the interpretation of the dream is that you may have promises that look dead, completely hopeless, like completely dead. And they're not dead. They're sitting on a shelf, and God's about to pull them down. And when it comes through and it bursts itself, it bursts, that thing is going to grow instantaneous. It is going to grow massive, super fast. It's going to be shocking, because I was standing there watching the dog lick the stuff off, and the more he licked, the bigger this thing would get. And it was shocking to me. I was like standing there in full amazement of how fast this thing was growing. And I was like, how did that thing just come out of this tiny tube, And it was like, wow, I was mesmerized by that experience. And so there was just so much symbolism, and I know, even personally, there's things in my life that, like, I know the Lord has promised me. And recently I've just been getting news after news of like, oh, well, that's completely hopeless now. And things that I really had anticipated, like my hopes were, and it was just like news that would devastate, those hopes. And so the Lord was just showing me, like, no, it's not dead. It's not over. I'm going to revive it. I'm going to grow it, and it's going to grow so fast. It's going to make your jaw drop. And so that's what I want to encourage you with. If you have a promise that looks hopeless, that looks dead, that looks like, oh, well, and even it being in the environment that it didn't even belong in that environment. I feel like, when it comes out, it's going to be in an environment in which it can grow. Maybe right now it doesn't make sense where you're at or what's going on, in the natural, even the place you live or the people that you're around. You're not in your right environment. But once you get to the proper environment where you can birth, it's going to be a rapid, full, like overnight, growth expansion. And I had a very similar dream with cows not even 3 months ago. We're pretty much the same concept. I'll share that dream with you. In the dream, I had all these baby cows, and when I recorded the dream the next morning, I recorded it in the middle of the night when I had it, and so I had forgotten. Because usually if I just wake up and I use a voice recorder on my phone and I just record, instantly, then I can go back to sleep and I won't worry about forgetting my dream. So I had recorded in the middle of the night, but then I forgot what I had recorded. And so later when I went back and listened to it, in the recording, it said that I had 33 baby cows, and they were tiny, like the size of small little dogs, and they were like puppy size cows. But I had 33 of them in my dream, and they were all so cute, and I was like, oh, y'all can go to sleep with me tonight. So I piled them all in my bed, and we went to sleep, and we were all like cuddled up, with these tiny little cute cows. And then overnight, the cows grew so large that they were squishing me, and they were like full grown cows overnight, and so like literally it was like overnight blessing, overnight abundance, overnight provision, overnight blessing that grows so large it was like squishing me to death. And so the same theme, right? So the Lord is just confirming, that you're entering into all those promises. And so a cow represents a promise, and 33 in particular, I googled this later, means the number 33 in Hebrew means God keeps his promise. Woo! I was like, okay, Lord. So it's not that I had 33 promises. It's whatever he has promised you, God's going to keep those promises to you. And so both these dreams were just so encouraging. So I woke up this morning, I was like, oh yes, it's going to come back to life. And so I celebrate Passover, and the Lord had told me around Passover that Passover, it would be resurrected. And so I always celebrate the Passover of the Lord, and I don't really celebrate Easter or Resurrection Sunday. I wait and I keep the 7 feasts of the Lord that are in Leviticus. And so every year there's always like a special blessing that he gives me on these feast days. And so I've always just, ever since I learned about him like 7 years ago, I've just always honored the Lord and kept the feast days of the Lord. And he told me that around Passover this year that we would start seeing manifested promises. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And like you have Passover, you have unleavened bread for a whole week. Passover kicks it off, and on the last day is the Feast of First Fruits and the Feast of Abundance. It's like you can eat bread again, you're having a big feast, and that's the day that Jesus rose from the dead. And so it's all about the resurrection of the Lord and the first fruits to God. And so I'm really looking forward to that, and I feel like coming up on that, it's going to be a special time this year. And so if you're waiting on a promise, if you're waiting on something from the Lord and it looks dead, I'm here to tell you, he can bring anything back to life. If he can raise himself from the dead, he can do anything in your life. There's nothing that is impossible for those who believe. And so no matter what it looks like, it could look completely hopeless, it could just look devastating, it could be heartbreaking, it could, whatever it is, don't believe the bad report. Just believe that he who promised is faithful. He is faithful to fulfill his word to you. So with that, I love you guys, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.